Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to use ASPX code and HTML encoding. So let's start a new Visual Studio project. We're going to make it a ASP.NET web application, and I'm going to call it ASPX Demo. I'm going to place mine in the desktop and click OK. We're going to pick the empty template and web forms. And I'm going to add a new item, and that will be a web form. And I'm going to call this one inline code. And the div here, we're going to add some ASPX code. And the way we do this is we use a less than sign and a percent symbol. In this case, I'm just going to say int a equals 3, int b equals 4, int c equals a plus b. And we're going to use response.write and just display C. And basically what this symbol means is just that we are switching from HTML essentially and ASPX code here to a section where we're going to use C# to generate what the response is. In many ways, you can think of it this way. All of this gets turned into HTML using the normal process of running IIS, turning this into HTML. And then here, the compiler switches over to just running C#, basically server-side code, and the response.write takes whatever we calculated and turns it in to a HTTP stream object, basically text, which gets streamed to HTTP. And so you can switch back and forth between, on an ASPX page, between just writing markup and then using C# to generate your code or your markup. I'm going to use Control F5 to build this and run it. And what we see is 4 plus 3 gets added together to make 7. We did the response.write, and in fact, it displayed it. And if you think of this just as basically a write line statement or a regular write statement, you can basically do whatever you want in this write statement to display the results. You could even put in tags in here. And you can see that those H1 tags actually get implemented. So if you think about web development or ASP, is basically just generating HTML programmatically and then sending it to the response stream. That really is all we're doing here. Let's try another example. I'm going to add another web form, and I'm going to call this one getting results. And in this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a method. And notice that the difference here is I have the less than %, but there's this equal symbols. What that equal symbol means is whatever you have over the right here, display. So actually, I could do this. And you can see that whatever with the equals, it gets rid of the need to put in the response.right. It just evaluates whatever's on the right of the expression on the right and passes it out as your test code. And in fact, you could almost think of an ASPX page as something like this. You can see I took all those tags and I threw them in here. I need to escape out all of these forms so that, or these quotes that are on the inside. And you see that still worked. And we could actually almost throw everything up through here and down through here into this. And it kind of illustrates what a ASPX page really is. Okay, so obviously not as clean or easy way to write HTML if you put it all inside of a block like that, but it works. You still get the code, and really this page, you can render it pretty much all in this evaluation tag here. We don't do that because we like having our page laid out in a way that's easy to read. So I'm going to, since I kind of made a mess of this, I'm going to delete it and rebuild this page. And then again, I'm going to put in my evaluation tags. And I'm going to create a method in the code behind page. So if I view code, I have page load, and I'm just going to make a method called getText1. And I'm just going to call that method. So anything that evaluates to a string, essentially, or actually to a number or anything, will be just sent to essentially a response.write method call. And it's just a shorter way of writing that. Just by putting an equal sign, it just says evaluate whatever's on the right and throw it to the HTTP response. If I run that, we can see that it did in fact display our text here. Hello from page. You'll notice that it takes a while to run the first time, but then when I subsequently do a run, it comes up immediately. And the reason for this is that ASPX pages build a DLL, a dynamic link library, from all of our code the first time a page is referenced. From then on, that DLL is generated and runs much faster. So when you deploy an application to a web server, realize that if it seems like it takes a long time to run the first time, that's just because there's still some compilation that's being done. And you should really look at subsequent loads of the page to see what the speed will be. One of the dangers of displaying code can be something called script injection. And this is a security vulnerability for some web pages where someone using your web page could, if you gave them an input field, input some HTML script code. So we're going to try to demonstrate that here. And what I'm going to do is drag in a text box, a button, and then I'm going to just throw on some paragraph tags to make this a little better formatted. And then we're going to throw in some evaluation tags. And the expression on the right is basically just going to say, take whatever's on the text box and display it. And I'm just going to put in some test statements here, and we can see that this works. It just basically evaluates it took whatever was in here, and using C#, it's just calling the text box 1 property for text, which just returns whatever's in the text box, and passes, of course, to response.write, and now it just displays it. Now let's try this. Let's put in an anchor tag. So effectively, this is in a sense script injection. It's not putting in a malicious script at this point, but if I can inject an anchor tag, then theoretically I could inject code. Or in this case, if you don't really want necessarily users always having the ability to put links into their pages, because maybe a viewer to your website might click on that, and that might go to a page that fakes yours and gets the user to, say, type in a user ID and password. So being able to inject an anchor tag is potentially a vulnerability in a web page. So I'm going to click on this, and notice that we get an error, and it says a potentially dangerous request form value is detected. So one of the nice things is that with ASP.NET, and it automatically set up to detect potential script injection vulnerabilities and display an error message. It's not very elegant if this shows up on your page, but on the other hand, potentially it was an attacker that did it, so maybe they'll deserve elegance. I don't know how you could catch these exceptions and display your own message, but it is actually very nice that ASPX kind of protects you automatically from these types of vulnerabilities. And at the top of your page, let's say that you did want your customer to be able to put HTML code in. And I would probably recommend that this would be an instance where you would make sure that this is only on a page which someone who's logged in can access, and later on there's material in your book on how to do authentication. But I would probably only do validate request false on a page where a trusted user, maybe some kind of an admin, or maybe you're providing a page which is designed for someone to be able to write their own HTML. And in that case, you would set validate to false. And if we run it this time, and create the same anchor tag, and click the button, notice now we have it actually generated this. And when we click the button, textbox1.text happened to be an anchor tag. When it got sent to the response stream, it actually creates an actual link tag. If I click on this, it'll take me to, in this case, CNM's website. But that could be, whatever that could be someone's own website. So that potentially is a security vulnerability unless you've authenticated someone in and you made that page for them to write HTML. to illustrate other devices provided to you to prevent script injection, there is the server.html encode function. And if you wrap whatever you're sending to the response stream with HTML encode and run that, if we try to send this, you'll notice that what it does is it actually renders this in a way that it's not actually rendered HTML. It just displays exactly what you wrote. And if I view page source, we can see it's using ampersand LT for the angle braces, and HTML encode basically takes whatever inputs in and substitutes the angle braces for the HTML code required to just display it. And so that can be useful. Let's say you're making a tutorial website and you want to show HTML. If you just pushed HTML out to it, it will actually make an anchor tag. If you want to see what the actual code is, you can HTML encode in order to actually display it. Alternatively, you use HTML encode just to make sure that whatever the user sent you will not render as actual code on the browser. So that's another way of securing your code. A shortcut for that is to do it this way. You can put a colon, and we're going to get rid of HTML encode and see what happens here. And if your user tries to put in a anchor tag, it does the same thing. So that colon is a shortcut to saying is equal to the HTML encode of anything that's in here. So that's another way of securing your website. And arguably, this is a little bit more elegant maybe than using the validation request part and driving a error page anytime someone tries to put a less than sign in some code. So I'm going to re-enable validate request by just deleting that and set that equal and for example, if I said less than 5, that should be fine. If I was writing some formula, so you could see where potentially if someone's writing some kind of statement that might have a lot of less than or greater than signs, you would get this annoying server error. And so the way to avoid that is just use the colon . And still you get that problem. So the way you would fix it is put the colon and turn off validation, and now And now someone can put their math symbols in without getting a validation error. The other thing we can do is something called data binding. I'm going to add another web form. We're going to call this one data binding. And I'm going to bring in a button. And here, we're going to, rather than putting the text in directly, we're going to do this. We're going to say %. And this time, rather than a colon or an equals, we're going to use a number sign. And we're going to create later on a method called getButtonText. We still have to write that method. And in our code behind page for this page, I'm just going to add a public method called getButtonText. And in my page load, I'm going to say button1 dot and call its data bind method. And what this is going to do is when you call a data bind method, it will look for these types of tags and it'll evaluate the expression inside of it to get to get some text and replace this whole entire tag with whatever this expression is. In this case, the expression is a method call to this getButtonText, and it should return button text to this tag. And you can see that my button has getButtonText exclamation point as its text property, and that happened with the data bind call. If I don't have that call to the data bind, let's see what happens. I'd actually get a button which doesn't have any text. Unlike the previous run, we can see that I do in fact have to call the button's data bind method to make this code here, this expression, become evaluated. Another way you can do this is rather than doing button1.databind, you can do page.databind, and this will bind every data bind statement on the entire page. And so if I were to run this again, we can see that it works as well. So generally, if you have a number of elements that you're going to need to bind to get their values, you can just use the page data bind method. Another type of ASPX coding that you can use is expressions. And to do that, we're going to first go to the web config page, and we're going to add some app settings, and we're going to add a key equal to button title, and we'll set the value equal to click me. And I'll add another web form. And again, to illustrate what we can do, I'm going to bring in a button and set its text property equal to $$ app settings button title. And what this will do is it will go to our web config, look for the app settings tag, look for the one called button title, and it's going to return the value. So if you think of a lot of these things in your web config, it's just dictionaries with key value pairs. Essentially what this is saying is go get me the value associated with this key called button title, and it'll just replace it. So here we're using the $ rather than the number sign, and if I just run this, you can see it did in fact set the title of this button to whatever the app settings is. And you don't even necessarily need the button. You could just throw this in here. Oh. So you can't, you do have to do a few things here. You'd have to put ASP literal. Let's try this and see if that works. So we do have to put this into a tag to make this actually generate something. And you can see that that literal was evaluated and generates just some text here. So you could use this as a way of, let's say that you didn't know what you wanted, some standard HTML to show up on your page. Maybe it's some kind of logo or some kind of standard phrase. You could create an app setting, and let's see if we can make an anchor tag. So let's see if that works. Actually, I did this backwards, so that should be a less than. And then this last one should be a greater than. So we have our less than, our href equals a quote, end quote. This should be a greater than to terminate the A, and then we should have a less than here. And of course, unfortunately, it looks kind of odd in the button because it doesn't result in a decent anchor tag. But here we can see that down this area, it turned into an anchor tag. And so you could see how you could, and it actually works. So you could see how with your web config, you could, if you encode it, you could create some HTML that maybe is a standard logo or a standard link that you might use inside, and it'd be something, if it was on multiple pages, it'd be something that you could change in one location in your web config that might echo throughout multiple pages. So just an example of some creative ways of using this $sign evaluation ASPX tag. Another way of using this type of approach is using resources. Often resources files are used to do localization, where you might have, for your titles, you have different options depending on which language is enabled. So we're going to add a app global resources folder. And in this resources folder, we're going to add a resources file. And we're going to call it sample resources. And we're going to create a resource called message1, or an entry called message1, and for the value, my really cool message. And let's add another page to illustrate this. Another web form we're going to call resource demo. We're going to bring in a label. And a button. And here we're going to do a $$ and say resources. sample resources. And select message 1. So again, we're really doing, with all of these things, we're kind of using, we have different ways of representing dictionaries. Before we used the web config to make a button title. And then in with the resources, it's basically just a table with name values, and then we can point to which resources we're going to use, in this case sample resources, and what the message is. And let's just run this. And we can see we get my really cool message displayed here. It's just pulling it from the resources and throwing it there. And if we want to do the button, it would be the same approach. Less than % resources Let's make sure I use the right term. Button text 1, yes. Oh, I forgot the $sign. Let's put that in. And you can see now my button is named from the resource file. So this concludes a presentation showing all the different ASPX type of commands that you can throw in, and it all stems from this less than % tag, and either the $sign, the number sign, or the % sign. Thank you very much.